going live on Rope Witch.
And then will it
kind of get both of us a little bit?
Will it notify me on here?
If you have your notifications on, but you can also just go to me.
Can I just go to you?
And then
what do I do here?
And then I can invite you on. Or you can also request.
I can request. Here, I'll just request. I mean,
it's
happening.
Yeah, I didn't realize
it's happening.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Let me turn down the volume. We'll see if this. Okay, y'all have to let us know here on Instagram how the audio is before we actually get started. We are also live on Facebook on a page that I literally just started today, so I'm excited to be able to record on that. So welcome, y'all. Please let us know in the comments if sound is weird.
Oh, we love you, V.
I know, we love you.
Yeah.
Is it echoing?
Is it echoing? Yeah. Are y'all getting feedback?
I hope not. I'm hoping that because we haven't seen anything, that means that it's okay. Let us know at any point if you're getting feedback or weirdness. Sounds great. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Welcome to Tension with Intention, which is this weird thing where we're going to talk about really tense topics that have to do with BDSM and kink and all the things. And I've been trying to start this for forever, and now this is the time. So it's here, and this is the first one officially. Yes. If you are on Instagram, hello. And also this is streamed on Facebook, on the Rope Witch Facebook. Look for it if you haven't. If you're friends with me on FindTheBliss Bunny, you can find it there. So yes, thank you for all of the support. And I'm passing the mic because I have my beautiful, lovely, amazing partner, YumYumPanda here, to chat about some shit, y'all. So buckle up, and pay attention to the signage and the information.
Oh yeah, no, let's get that up front. No, we're not gonna forget. Oh, do you need to start?
Oh yeah, let me just do this, but that's okay. I wanted it to have a little intro, so here we go. Let's talk about this.
Let's talk about this sign here. I think something that we have all been talking a lot about is ensuring that we do not keep letting people do a ton of free ass labor out here. Free ass labor. And so we have Cash App on here. Shakti's is at the top. Mine is in the pink. And then, Shakti's campaign donation website is here as well. I'm just going to very explicitly say donate to her before you donate to me. But I am here to be in conversation, which I'm very excited about. We'll keep bringing this up and back because I'm not going to say this again. This is important. Yeah. So we'll bring that up and back so you all can continue to see it and make sure you're donating. But yeah, thank you so much, Scout, for having me here and for starting this, I think, really important series of conversations and continued conversations. I'm very much looking forward to all of the people that will be on Tension with Intention and all of those things. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I kind of talked a little bit about this on my personal Instagram. I have been rather quiet in terms of just sharing from my own personal voice and things like that on social media recently within the last couple of weeks, really trying to harness and hone, and identify what my role is in all of this work, not on just a daily basis, but just on a continual basis, and especially when specific conversations get brought to light and the really important individuals and people that really need to be centered at the beginning of those conversations and continue to be centered in those conversations. And so after a lot of conversation with both Black folks in my community, but also through work and in my personal life, I've really kind of honed in on where my role is and what I can hopefully offer into this space and offer into this community as we continue discussion. And so I just want to say, I'm here to talk to the non-Black people.
Yeah.
The non-Black people, including the folks of color who are not Black. And so that is where my voice is coming from. And that is who I am addressing in a lot of these conversations, because my voice is not important to Black people right now, as it should not be. And so Shakti, Scout, will also be offering a lot of her thoughts and sharing at whatever capacity she feels comfortable. But also she's tired and exhausted. And so we're here, we're doing it. And I hope that I'm excited to see that so many of you all are on here. I'm excited for this conversation. I'm just really excited for all of the things that I think we're going to talk about today. There will be lots of space for questions, lots of space for discussion. So please feel free to drop questions if you have them in the chats, in the lives, wherever you are watching this. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. If you didn't read my story, I think I just want to frame this also because I know people are going to ask, what authority do you have to be talking on any of this? Like, what experience do you have? What education do you have? And those are fair questions. And so I do have a master's degree in nonprofit leadership with a focus in diversity and inclusion work. I also have a bachelor's degree in secondary education with a focus in social studies and ESOL. So those are kind of my academic standpoints of where I'm coming at for this conversation. I also have lived experiences as a biracial Asian person, as well as a gender non-conforming queer person, non-native English speaker, and somebody who immigrated to the US when I was 11. And so those are kind of the lenses that I use when I'm engaging in this work and talking about this work. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for over 8 years, particularly focusing on social justice issues, along with a lot of volunteer and advocacy work in grassroots movements kind of across the nation in the 3 different states I've lived in. So that is just some context for some of you because I know some of you are very curious and going to ask. And so just wanted to get that out of the way for folks that were wondering. And I currently work in the nonprofit sector as a diversity, equity, and inclusion manager. So my day-to-day work is talking about this. It is dealing with all of this. It is having conversations with our white CEO, with our white board members, with our white team members, our non-Black team members, and bringing awareness, bringing education, and partnering with as many folks from the community as possible to bring a really collaborative effort on these conversations at work. And so this conversation is going to be very holistic. We'll talk about, rope and kink and BDSM for sure. But I also have the ability to share really thoughtful and intentional work suggestions for folks that are in organizations that are trying to do this work, folks that are in organizations that are trying to figure out how to get more involved in this work. So there'll be a lot of those conversations going on as well. And then we have a really wonderful initiative that we'll release a little bit later, which we're very excited about. And we hope that you will support us in that piece too. So I spent some time thinking about, how I wanted to open up this conversation and why it's so important. And I think what's really important to me is that I speak from my own perspective and I speak from my own experience and I don't try to speak for any other race or group of people during this conversation. Shakti is here, Scout is here. She can share if she feels comfortable. And then there's people on this call on the live too that can share their experiences if they feel comfortable. And so it felt really important that I just speak from my own experience as a biracial, particularly Japanese person in the kink and rope space. And so I just want to say that me talking about my experience as a Japanese American is not to take away the narrative or change the narrative on what's important right now, which is that Black lives are important, they matter, they're important, and we need to make sure that we are supporting Black folks during this time. And so one of the things that Shakti and I talked about is that we wanted to open up this discussion with the lens that Black Lives Matter, and that is the focal point of this conversation. And there's just some other things we need to talk about as a community.
Opens a can of worms.
And so that's kind of the lens that I'm using to kind of start this conversation. So I just definitely wanted to preface that I'm not trying to change the narrative or take away from the narrative at all, but I can only speak from my own personal experience. So with that being said, I have not talked about this really ever in my kink journey or in my rope journey, and just thinking about having to share, not having, but thinking about sharing now and what this all means to me and how it's impacted me has given me a lot of time to think about it lately. And yeah, I think I have a lot more to say than I thought I did on this particular topic. And so that's just been, it's been eye-opening and it's been a lot the last couple of weeks. So with that being said, I have been in the kink space for about 7 years, particularly doing rope for about 6.5, 7 years or so. What day is it? And I think I just want to really touch on, recognizing that racism, social justice issues, these injustices that exist in our world right now and in our society are not insular to, just what we do in kink. Like it touches everything. We do not do kink in a vacuum. We don't do kink in a just solo isolated space away from the rest of society. Everything in the world, everything in our experiences, everything in our society, everything that we've ever come up against, all of that plays a role in who we are and how we show up to kink spaces. And so I started doing rope after watching a white girl who I deeply adore doing suspension and rope at a party one time. Ended up approaching her, had a great conversation about rope in general, and ended up taking on a menteeship with her and learning rope and kind of going on my journey. And I want to say that I think it was just starkly such a stark experience to begin a conversation with somebody about rope and talking about rope and things like that. And then recognizing that not a single time in any of our conversations, or even in the conversations I was having with other people, was anybody ever really holistically or thoughtfully mentioning Japanese culture, Japanese history, or the kind of beginnings and how rope came to be and how shibari came to be and kimbaku and seminawa and all of those things, how those things came to be and where they came from, and ultimately where we as a culture took that from. I think that that's a really important piece of this, because we all acknowledge that it is the privilege of a lot of a small group of particularly wealthy, particularly white cis men who are able to fly to Japan, get real authentic education from Japanese instructors and be embedded in Japanese culture and learning in that space. And then what happened after that was those folks came back to America and started talking and sharing and showing everyone how to do rope. And I think I want to touch on the fact that I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing. I'm not particularly feeling some type of way about the fact that folks learned this new hobby or learned this new thing that they're passionate about and then wanted to share it. I'm not saying that at the core is problematic. I'm just saying that I don't think we spend enough time talking about where that culture comes from and who is impacted by that and the real stories behind some of this work, and also the real stories behind some of the trauma that is attached to rope in particular. And so I think something I just want to share is about recognizing that I am a Japanese identified person who walks around in these white spaces with folks that are doing rope, folks that are asking me to do rope, either tying them or being tied. And it is very rare. Maybe a handful of times has anybody ever mentioned like, hey, I know you're from Japan, and like, can we talk about what rope means to you as someone that comes from that culture, was embedded in that culture, lived in that culture, grew up in that culture? Are there things I need to know about you or your experience that can help me better support, showing the gratitude and the connection of what I feel for this activity that I know is rooted in your own culture. And I think in that same context, right, being incredibly frustrated when I go into rope spaces, particularly like teaching classes or cons or things like that, and I'm trying to, teach or share about my personal rope style, which really isn't particularly rooted in Japanese culture. And part of that is because I didn't feel like it could be when I first started my journey. And recognizing that this had become so whitewashed and so Americanized that anything that I had to say or feel about my culture or the way that it was being appropriated or the way that it was showing up in rope spaces wasn't appropriate for me to say. So much so that the one time that I tried early on in my rope journey, I got shut down by a white guy in one of the classes, basically telling me I don't know anything and that I just need to be quiet. And so when you grow up in a culture and experience it at its full capacity, right, being really honed in on it, having this holistic experience, having this lived experience where you are growing up in a specific culture, and then moving to America and feeling this huge culture shock about, what do I do in this space? How do I navigate this space? How do I show up in this space? How do I get people to like me? How do I get to feel included? right? You're going through that process and you're trying to figure that out. And at the same time, you're having to strip yourself of this culture that you know and have inside you and have experienced, and you have to like strip that of yourself in order to just be allowed to be in that space, to just exist in that space. And don't raise your hand and don't speak too loudly and don't say anything. Because then somebody's going to say something to you and then you're just that girl, or you're the problem, or you're the person that's causing a bunch of issues. And anybody that's sat in any classes with me and any classes with Scout, we actively talk about social justice. We actively talk about the systems and the ways that people are oppressed in the kink space. And I think that that is an important piece of this work. We are not given a free hall pass from these conversations just because we like to get together and do a bunch of fun things together, right? These are also rooted in deeply understanding people's trauma, deeply understanding people's experiences, and collectively figuring out how we move forward from those conversations. And so I think something that I just want to say, particularly to the rope community, is that you need to do better. You need to do better with rope, and you need to do better with Japanese culture. Not a single person has ever asked me to teach on Japanese culture or teach about Japanese history or talk about Japanese anything in any rope space. And I'm very vocal about the fact that I'm Japanese. And for people to take something from my culture and then completely basically erase me unless I am showing up as a white person is just so deeply damaging. And, you know, I'm not saying that people can't teach about Japanese history. I'm not saying that people who go to Japan and embed themselves in the culture and learn and engage and really do get a wealth of knowledge from these folks in Japan. I'm not saying you can't come back and share information about that, but are you also plugging Japanese American authors? Are you also talking about the work that Japanese instructors are doing in Japan and how to actively support them, how to send donations to them, how to support their work? Because they're only getting money from the white guys that are able to go over to Japan and pay them for their labor. Like, nobody in America, unless a Japanese instructor actually physically comes to their city, is like just giving out, you know, donations or money to Japanese culture or Japanese instructors for just their labor and work and all of the stuff that they have set up for us to even be remotely successful with rope in America. And I think the thing too that I just want to say is that know who you're tying and hold some fucking space for that. Hold space for the person that you are tying. Like, you know, there are things that we do in rope that I'm like, let's take a pause and talk about that before we do that, because I know that that might be triggering for you, or I know that might be traumatizing for you. And it has nothing to do with this person's like immediate experiences. It's also about like this intergenerational trauma that this person has experienced based on the color of their skin or their religion or their heritage or their ethnicity, and holding some goddamn space for that and letting it be okay for there to be space for that. And recognizing that when we are in these spaces talking about things, you all are making so many microaggressions that you don't even recognize. Like, I've just been in so many classes where people are like, oh, like the armpit's like the second vagina for Japanese people. And I'm like, yeah, I don't understand why you had to say that. And I don't understand why you had to say it like that. If you were trying to express that the armpit is an intimate and erogenous zone for Japanese people and Japanese culture, you can fucking say it. You can say it like that. Like, you don't have to be so derogatory about it. You don't have to be so embedded in yourself and centering your voice and your opinion, right, on this thing that you probably don't know much about, right? Because if you haven't even tied somebody in Japan and had these conversations about what is appropriate or what is sensual or what is extra erotic, like, you're just learning from people who say that they know these things. Mm-hmm. And so you could be perpetuating those same microaggressions and those problematic behaviors without even realizing it. And I think this is going to touch on something we're going to talk about in a little bit, but like, who told you to say that? Like, who told you to say that? And if your answer is, well, I had a Japanese instructor tell me that one time, misogyny is alive and well in Asia. Let me just say that for you all. Alive and well. We kicking it with the misogyny in Asia, okay? And if anybody's ever seen a movie like Memoirs of a Geisha or anything like that, y'all don't understand. Our virginities were sold to people. Sold. Our virginities. Not just our bodies, but this like concept and social construct of virginity was sold off to people, highest bidder, or whoever that person decided was most adequately, equipped to like be a part of the situation for whatever gain that they were intrinsically motivated by. They would sell that. And then talking and moving in the historical context too of after that happened, then World War II was happening, and America sent a bunch of soldiers to Japan.
Yeah, guess what happened then? Just guess.
And y'all up in here taking wives, bringing us back to America, trying to get us to assimilate with you. And like, don't get me wrong, Asian people, we part of the problem too. I'm not saying we're absolved of any issues here. We've got our own issues we got to deal with, and we can talk about that in a minute. But what I'm specifically talking about right now is especially white men recognizing their role in the kind of immigration of Asian people to America and where that is rooted from and where that stems from. Specifically, American soldiers and American troops coming over and working with our diplomats in Japan and talking to our leaders. And then it is normalized in that society that in those meetings, in those business conversations, you would just have a slew of Asian women around you servicing you, right? Like pouring you tea and like getting your food and cleaning up after you and like all of this stuff. And then we get brought over to America and we still assimilate with that same concept because you taught us that. You taught us that this is how we need to be in order to be in your favor, in order to be married by you, in order to be loved by you, in order to be wanted. And then we come to America and we just assimilate ourselves in that construct and through the conversations that we have with you and the consistent misogyny that we feel. And I think misogyny is a problem everywhere, but I can't say this enough. It is a huge problem in Asian countries. And I don't mean just Asian, like where I'm from, like Japan. Like, I mean, like, Southeast Asian countries and all of those. It's a problem. It's a huge problem. And so then you as a white man approach me to do rope and are like not holding space for the fact that like, there is a whole history, right? Whether we've engaged in that kind of dynamic or not, but there is a history of my family, of my legacy, of my ancestralist that has engaged in this like white male complicated dynamic. And I'm saying that as a biracial Asian person who has a white dad and an Asian mom and has an Asian stepmom. Like, so it is this real concept that exists. And we're not doing a great job in rope. And I'm tired of being quiet about that. I'm tired of feeling ashamed about that. I'm tired of feeling like I don't have a reason to say anything or that I'm not worthy of saying anything. I'm just tired of it. And I think we need to recognize that racism is alive and well in this country. And it absolutely disproportionately affects Black folks. But y'all are just perpetuating this in so many spaces. And I think I'm honing in so specifically on the rope space because the rope space is so big and it is one of the bigger contingents of the kink space. And so white. I'm like, how is an Asian activity, an activity that came from Japan, how is it so white? Why are there not at least more Asian folks leading, teaching, talking about our history, talking about our collective trauma and how that manifests in this space?
Well, in reality, I feel like in reality, when things come to America in this way, exactly, Kim just took it out of my mouth, money. It is exactly translating to the economic issues in the class system of America. You bring this super fucking expensive, trendy, super flashy, like hobby that's going to cost you at least $250 just to drop on a rope kit, just to get a full kit of rope, suspension materials, not to mention if you want to actually learn hands-on from anyone how much you're going to have to pay for an intensive, how much you would pay to travel to a conference. Many of us have talked about how we couldn't afford conferences like when we started going to them. And that's why we end up volunteering. And that's why we end up giving up our free time and money and space once again, just to be included in the space. And it speaks to the class of like, who's wealthy enough to be able to actually keep this up as a hobby? The wealthy white men. And a lot of the white men that you see in rope over the age of 30 who are gainfully employed or who just have any type of status and economic wealth that, as we know, systematically comes easier to them in their life, for them to be able to sustain this hobby, because that's the biggest thing that I hear. I know plenty of Black people in kink. The question is not why aren't Black people in kink, because they're in kink. They're here. They're out here, y'all. They're just not with you, but they're out here. And the question is, why aren't they doing rope? And most of the time when they're doing rope, they're doing non-suspension rope. And that's totally fine because everybody has their own fucking flavor and that's really awesome. But the reality is they can't afford the classes and the instruction to be trained on how to suspend safely, and they're unwilling to do it in an unsafe way. So they end up doing a lot of really amazing decorative rope that they can learn from multiple different avenues like books or on YouTube, which is beautiful. But they have this desire to do all of this stuff that they see on the internet and all of this acrobatic, beautiful, connective rope that they don't have access to because they can't make it to fire and they can't make it to bed and they can't make it to, you know, RIP Shapari Khan, and they can't make it to all of the many places that we usually congregate, where I've met many of you in these spaces to exchange this type of information. And so I really think that the answer to that is like, rope is so white because the fact is rope is expensive. Yes, see, Miss Lee King says rope is a $6,000 budget for her a year. So that is some real shit. And that's if you're taking care of your rope, if you're being responsible and actually taking care of your kit, depending on how often you suspend, if you're actually like maintaining things and replacing carabiners and like understanding the life span of your straps and understanding all of these various things that need to be replaced over time, as well as traveling and going to classes. This is an expensive hobby.
And y'all made it that way. Let me just say that too. You all have done this really wonderful job of like somehow making rope this monetary like empire almost, on like, you have to, you know, pay this much money to learn from this type of person. And I get it, right? Like, I get that some of you are flying overseas and that is a lot of money, and like that takes work and effort and like finances and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that like you didn't put any money into it, but if your answer is, I deserve thousands and thousands of dollars for a class that I'm teaching because I went to Japan and learned this and paid someone to teach me also, you're just recreating this like incredibly capitalistic, incredibly problematic wheel of like monetary gain. Like, if you look at all of the other kink spaces, nobody else charges the money that we charge for rope education.
It's crazy.
It is wild. It is wild. And, you know,
it's hundreds of dollars. This isn't just like, it's a difference, because just speaking, sorry, from like a business and marketing perspective, from a business and marketing perspective, when you're pricing something out, depending on content or the offering in which you are putting on the table, you are essentially, you know, pricing out your time, your education, all the different things, and putting it in this package. But the reality is, if you're battling over pricing something at, $150 or $300, the reality is, if you're in a wiggle room of anywhere from $100 to $250, even to like $400, the same people can afford those things. So when you're battling of like, should I price my intensive that I'm gonna host, or should I price my con at $400, or should I price it at $550? The same person that can afford $400 is the same person that can afford $550. Like, those are the same people. There isn't anybody who's going to not go to your con because of $50. Like, they're going to figure out a way to get that $50 and they're going to do it. What we're missing here is understanding that there's a whole group of people that, like Panda said, you're creating this capitalist structure that is leaving out an entire gap of people that can't even make it to that space. And so I feel like you have a couple of options here. We can keep this going. Like, that's totally fine. You want to keep your $1,000 price marks? Like, I'm cool. We can play in that arena. It just means y'all are going to have to redistribute even more wealth, because the reality is that if y'all are charging y'all's worth, then we're for sure all going to charge our worth, and then everything's going up. Everything's going up. And if everything's going up and we're still demanding that people need to be included, then y'all are going to need to start donating some of that money to some of these funds, like Madame Posh's fund that she just developed, and all of these other funds that we can actually help fund these people to get to cons. Y'all are going to have to redistribute more of that wealth. And so it's like what we were talking about, I think we're going to get to in a little bit, is like the sacrifice. The sacrifice is going to be larger. We all have a choice. We can either get back down to cutting these prices and actually being reasonable about what we're offering, or hell, we can all play in the big leagues, whatever. The value of the dollar is going to depend on what we state it as. So we can all keep playing in these big leagues. It just means y'all are going to have to redistribute even more wealth to have actual inclusive spaces.
Mm-hmm. And just like, we'll get into this a little bit too, talking about just organizing and putting together cons and putting together events. But I'm going to be really honest with you all. I taught quite a bit in, God, what year is it? 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes. I taught quite a bit in 2018 in a number of different cons. And there was one con that I applied for, that ended up making me teach more classes than any other presenter at that con. More classes by at least one, sometimes even two. Some people were teaching 3, I was teaching 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I got paid the least. I came out of pocket to be at that con, to be in that space, to teach, to educate, to be with all of you in community and share my knowledge and my information with all of you, because I want you all to have it, because I want to share it with you. And I came out of pocket for that. As a biracial person of color, and also as a queer person, as a gender, like all of I work in the nonprofit sector, like nobody out here is rich, okay? And I think we need to be honest about that, because I feel like everyone's idea is that everyone's rich in this world and everyone's rich in kink. The answer is no, we are all not. And many of us are just scraping to get by or just barely making it. And none of us are honest about that. We don't want to talk about the class situation that's also inherently happening in the kink space and what that looks like and where that's coming from.
Yeah.
And you know, for Scout and I, we're done. We are done scaling back our pricing. We are done scaling back what we offer
and accepting the scraps.
Because
that was the year that we realized that. We were like, bitch, why are we were both teaching like 4 or 5 classes. We had no free time. We were running from one place to another. Meanwhile, we're all talking to the other presenters and we're like, bitch, we're out here getting paid the least. Like, what the fuck are we doing out here? We didn't even challenge it. We didn't even ask for more money. We were just like, sure, we'll take whatever we think we deserve and go to this con. And then little do we know, we're like barely breathing the whole weekend. I have people walking around asking me if I'm okay. And we're like running from one end of the hotel to the other, teaching all of these classes. And meanwhile, there are people teaching 2 classes over there that were getting paid way more than me. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm just not as important, or my instruction is not as valuable. And that is the issue.
Woo!
That is the issue here, is that like, why do we feel like and this is, by the way, those of you who've been following me for a long time, I've been very honest about this. I overwork myself to a degree by definition of who I am. Okay. And it is built into my bones. It is built into, honestly, I call it slave mentality. It's that bullshit of feeling like you got to earn your keep. And the reality is that in America, you all have treated us, and what I mean by us is marginalized people and minorities, you've treated us so fucking low for so fucking long that we truly intrinsically believe that we have to earn our right to be in spaces. And that is like how I feel most of the time, especially in this group, especially in this community, especially in Rope, is I have to earn my keep by continually giving something, by continually educating someone. I can't go live unless I have something to offer, or nobody's going to listen to me. I can't offer to teach this class unless unless I really flush out the content. By the way, I fill out twice as much content. And I mean, we talk about this all the time. We plan 2 to 3 times as much content for every class we plan than usually ever fits in the time, because we are convinced like we have to pack it full of all this stuff so that y'all feel like y'all are walking away with all these goodies, so that we feel like it was worth it that you took your time at this con and spent it with us. Meanwhile, we're over here going to Sis Whiteman's classes, and I was like, oh, is this the class? Is this the class? Like, is this what we're doing? And it's cool. Like, I'm not shitting on anybody's teaching style. I'm just like, oh, I'm over here packing 2.5 hours worth of content into like 65 minutes. And these people are out here, we're doing a 10-minute exercise and then like labbing the rest of the time, and they're getting paid more than me to deliver content. So like, that's all I want to get to the point of like, we really feel like we have to earn our keep. And this type of pricing structure, this type of understanding, this type of class structure, it does nothing but fuel that belief.
So let's talk about how you can be a part of the change of this conversation we're having literally right this second. Vote with your money. Vote with your money. Send an email to your con and say, I bought a ticket to be here. Tell me that you are compensating so-and-so and so-and-so appropriately. What does your compensation structure look like? Who's getting paid? What are they getting paid? Be transparent about that. Be honest about that. And I see, Anchor, I see your question about why I was getting paid the least. They set up their application structure so that I had to basically value myself to them and say, what is the least I am willing to accept to be here at your con?
And then give us that.
And then give me that. And from anybody that follows me, anybody that's been in any of my classes, anybody that knows me, knows that I will teach for free a lot of the time. Have a lot of the time. And I will give things away. I've given my harness away, both of my harnesses away multiple times over quarantine for free to people, because I know you all are struggling. I know we're all hurting. We're all hurting out here. And so when you have the agency and ability to pay people and actually give people money, for you to ask them to value themselves is trash. It's trash, because I will never value myself the same way that a cis white male het presenter will value.
Or have the balls to ask for that much money.
Or have the balls to ask for that much money. And for cons to put that on presenters is so incredibly inequitable. And this is just a part of the conversation, right? Like, what do your structures look like? What does your process look like? How do you pick presenters? How are you doing all of this work in these organizations and when you're running these big events? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But I think I just want to make sure we wrap up this kind of first context conversation around cultural appropriation and Japanese culture. And so I want to offer some thoughts. And again, okay, let me just say this real quick. Many of you that follow me, who have known me for a while, know that I have been doing this type of work for a very long time. And I post about it a lot. Not just this week, not just last week. If you're ever on my page, I am posting about it. It is important to me. It is something I talk about a lot. Which also means that a lot of you know what I do for a living. Which means a lot of you slide into my DMs asking for some free-ass labor. So much free labor. And you know what? I have given it so freely to so many of you because I care so much about making sure we build a world that people are seen as equitable and just and humane. And so I give that labor for free. But God help me. The amount of people who I have given free labor to who have been silent these last 2 weeks, don't ever come into my DMs again.
What a waste.
Don't ever come into my DMs again. And I say that as a person who answers all of their DMs. If you have ever DM'd me, even the folks that aren't on my friends list and I have to go into the request to talk to you button, as long as it's not something really sexualized or something really like harmful, I at least give that double tap. I at least give that double tap.
Not leave you on red. Just try.
So I'm like, for you all, so you all know when you slide in my DMs, you're getting an answer from me at some point, whether it's a double tap, whether it's some actual information and education, resources, access to things, whatever you need. I'm always available for that, and I make myself very available for that. But don't you dare slide into my DMs anymore if you're not going to do anything. And yes, I am looking at you, Austin.
Yes.
I am looking at you, Austin. because there are so many people of you who have sat across the table from me, who have been at coffee with me, who have been at lunch with me, who have asked for my free ass labor. All of my free labor, didn't offer to pay for my meal, didn't offer to pay for my coffee, nothing. You just took from me and you were just chill with it. You were so chill with it. And like,
it's an ego thing.
Ooh.
It's an ego thing, because when you take that information and you don't do shit with it, why am I wasting this is why I say free black time. And some people get really offended about that, because I've been saying that lately. I'm like, don't waste my free black time, because it's free. It's free, and I'm free, and I am no longer a slave, so I do not owe shit to you. And when you take from me and then you don't do anything with it, I have wasted my fucking breath on you. I have wasted my fucking expertise on you. Wasted. And when I see that happening, I'm like, then why? Why waste my time? And I can only assume it's to stroke your ego into thinking that you are like attempting to do something better. But like, it's like I said before, and I will say this over and over again, and I said it, if anybody has been watching any of my Conscious Coven project on lives this week, I said it in there today. So if you were in there, sorry that this is going to be a repeat. But I am so sick of people wondering why people of color are so exhausted and they think we're so pessimistic. And the reality is that we lean on and we observe the values and the path of our ancestors. And let me tell you, as somebody who just recently had their last grandparent die, like recently in the last year and a half, they were still alive and well, looking at our culture struggle with the same shit that it was struggling with when they were born. So they're like, not shit's changed. We're over here out here protesting, and they're unleashing dogs on people and hoses. Like this is like what year are we in? You know what I mean? And it's like, so we're just at a point where it's like, believe it when I see it. Like, show me your motherfucking actions. I don't care about your fuck your black boxes, fuck your Black Lives Matter hashtag, fuck your t-shirts, fuck all that shit. Like, I want to see the action. This is why I didn't just make t-shirts to sell to you. I made t-shirts for a fucking fun, to support a cause that, by the way, my entire vanilla career has been built onto. And this is like my soul work. Therefore, like, this is not just a trend. This is something that I pour my heart, my soul, my energy into. I made no money for years doing this shit. Like, I am not in this to make money. I collect money to redistribute the wealth. And therefore, I want people to come back to the reality of understanding we're not pessimistic. We're not just wanting to take your money. It's not about that. In the West, money is an energetic exchange. This is no longer the ancient times when you can come to my house with a chicken and I have, fresh herbs for you. That's not how we do things anymore. We don't live on a barter system. Trust me, I would love that. We don't live in that world anymore. So our energetic exchange is being able to buy ourselves food, is being able to make sure that when I'm standing up and giving hip squeezes to a birthing mother for 12 hours and not sleeping overnight and barely eating, that I can go home and actually afford to get a fucking massage to maintain and sustain my ability to do my job, that I can actually afford to rest my bones and not give up money because I need to take a break. So this is what I'm talking about when I say, like, believe it when I see it, put your money where your mouth is. You're not going to get away with this bullshit of like, Black Lives Matter, okay, bye. Like, I'm over that bullshit. And everything that we're doing here is inherently political. It is inherently rooted in all of this systematic oppression that we all are also interwoven into, pretending that this doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like Panda said before, we don't do kink in a vacuum. This is all very relevant. So please, and I know some of y'all, I will kiki with you when I have the energy all day long. So I ain't even throwing shade at your nosiness, but I get those messages asking me why I don't tie with certain people, or I used to see you on this timeline and I don't see you anymore, or you used to tie with this person. I'm so interested in tying with them. I don't see you tying with them anymore. And I'm like, if you don't know, you better ask somebody, because this is what the Panda said something earlier that I really wanted to touch on as I'm ranting now. Of white people, I need you to understand how easy it is for you to take ownership of shit. It is so easy. It's almost like y'all don't even know you're doing it. And the thing is like, it's embedded in you. So it's something that you have to deeply unlearn. You have to deeply unlearn that. But you have to understand how easy it is for you to take something and be like, mine, it's mine now. And to feel like you have some sort of authority and ownership over it. You have no authority over most of the shit that you all have acquired, but that is what mainstream mainstream media in the US likes to tell you. Google yoga, go to your nearest yoga studio. You'll see some white thin women in some Lululemon pants. They're not going to tell you that yoga originated in North Africa. They're not going to tell you that all this shit was rooted in African spirituality and Kemetism and then taken to India, which then was brought over by Deskachar to the south or to the west. They're not going to talk about any of that. They're going to just be like, yoga is now for the rich, affluent white women. It is so easy for you to take this rope, to go to Japan once, to learn from one teacher, and then come back and be like, I know shit. Like, fucking bow down to me. I'm a fucking master. I'm a like whatever you fucking want to call yourself. Own your rope dojo and like do your thing. But it's so easy for you to just claim shit and not really care where it came from. And that is built into you. I mean, your ancestors did that shit. So that takes some deep unlearning. But also going back to like really what my intrinsic goal is, and my main underlying goal in all of my work in the kink community is harnessing genuine connection and trust with people who are engaging these types of experiences with each other. And you can't expect to harness any type of genuine trust with me when you don't understand me or my struggle or respect it whatsoever. You're not going to gain any type of trust with me where I'm going to let you hurt me, where I'm going to let you be in a position where I actually place trust in you, where I'm going to let you push me to limits and know that I trust you to understand and have compassion for anything that I might be going through. It honestly just shows me you're not equipped. It's not even a judgment call for me. It's just like, you don't have the tools to tie me. I don't care how great your uplines are. You don't have the emotional tools to come to the space and engage with me in kink. And so I just think it's important to understand that this is interwoven into how good of a rigger you are. It's interwoven into how good of a bottom you are. And I am I'm playing on shame. And I'm playing on your ability to always want to be good. I'm playing on all that shit because in history, I'm going to just tell you, with white people, very little has worked. Okay. It's been 500 years. And I definitely understand that all of these amazing psychologists that I have sometimes very long DM conversations with over Instagram, always talking. And I personally always say that you can't shame yourself into self-improvement. You really can't, because it can't start and end there. But it's okay for y'all to feel the shame. It really is okay for that, because that's where the growth is. And you gotta understand that you have shit to give away. You do have shit to sacrifice. We've been sacrificing for years, and now you have to understand that the sacrifice is necessary for y'all to move to the next level and actually helping us create this new space. It's going to take sacrifice. It might mean you don't get coffee for one day because you donated to somebody. It might mean that maybe you cut down on your grocery list this week and donate to a cause, and realize that there are some people who are on WIC and can't have to cut down on their groceries every week. There are some people, like, true story for me in the past, who've had to choose between buying dog food and trash bags at the dollar store. So like, that shit is real all the time for some people. So can you initiate some sort of sacrifice, which we should all know a lot about in what we do, in order to make it better for the group? Because the more that you are improving the quality of life for the group, you're also improving your quality of life too.
And quick history lesson for everyone: money and economic leverage is how you make change. If we look at the bus boycotting that happened in the civil rights movement, it happened for about a year. That was a year of Black folks committing to not riding public transportation. Mm-hmm. And as soon as the public transportation realized the revenue they were losing because Black folks were no longer riding public transportation, they changed their tune real fast.
That's also why we ask for money, because money's how y'all respond.
Yep.
That's how, if we make you lose your pocketbook, that's why I was like, fuck Target. I know everybody was all pissed about Target. I get it. Everybody loves their boo Target. Target's been super fucking inclusive. They've been coming to the forefront. But when people were destroying that fucking Target, I was like, fuck Target. There will be more Targets. Trust, okay? Target has enough money that Target, HEB, all these big ass stores, they actually have enough money to where like 5 of their stores per year could go up in fucking flame, and they could lose all that revenue, and it wouldn't even make a dent in like their costs for that year. They actually allow for that gap in revenue every year because they make that much money. So one Target store, fuck Target. There are plenty of Targets. It's good. They're going to recover like nobody's business. You know who's not recovering? I can name like a good handful of people right now, Black lives, who have fucking fallen, not just George Floyd and not just anybody who has passed away in the last year or two, but for the last 500 years, we're not getting those lives back. And so the fact that people were more concerned with the capitalist construct of stuff, you're destroying stuff, is like shocking to me, that you're not understanding how easy it is for these cops to destroy human lives, for these institutionalized systems. And it's not just cops, it's also doctors. It's a lot of these institutionalized systems that destroy Black lives on the daily. But that's okay, as long as y'all don't like throw shit through the windows and like destroy stuff. Like, I don't give a fuck about the things. And it's fuck Target, because when you hit them where it hurts in their money, that's when they start responding. And that's when they start realizing, oh, we got to start, getting on top of our shit. They're pissed about this. Like, they're just like, oh, they're mad. Now they're mad because we're losing the money. So when you're asking why we're always collecting money, pooling money, raising money, not only for the redistribution of wealth, it's also like how we actually get responses from y'all. Okay.
And so I think I just want to end this segment with how you can be a part of that change is by not purchasing a ticket to a con unless they have clearly stated that their presenters are people that are going to speak about social justice, that are going to talk about trauma, that are going to talk about the holistic experience of a kink-based activity and are going to teach that in their class, and that they are showing up for that, and that you have a lineup of diverse presenters with diverse experiences and are going to create inclusive and welcoming spaces. And I think I just need to say this to educators, because as someone that comes from an education background that does a lot of education, that is a skill set in it of itself. And if you are not honing and crafting that skill set, you don't need to be teaching. I don't care how good you are at anything. You need to learn how to teach people, how to make sure that your Asian student in the back doesn't feel like crying and running out of this room because you've literally just microaggressioned 8 different things about her heritage and her country in this one class, in the 30 minutes that they've been around you, right? Like, we need to demand that there is a higher standard for teachers. And I get it. Some teachers, right? Like, sometimes we go to cons and we just break even. We just don't make anything, right? And I get that some educators' stance is like, well, we don't make a profit, so why do we have to be like professional? I cannot even tell you how problematic that is. that because you are not making a profit, that somehow means that you're allowed to just do whatever you want. Like, you clearly are not centering the needs and the responsibilities of what it means to be a teacher in a space, and centering your students at the center of that conversation and what they need and what they want out of this experience, and how to just create a better world and a better kink space and a better rope space. Because we have been teaching in classes where we do like a circle or whatever at the end and just talk about, how the weekend went and whatnot. And the amount of people that are consistently, to both Scout and I've never had an educator talk about the things that you talk about. I never have an educator that does those kinds of exercises and allows me to explore trauma and to explore my sensitivity and explore my ancestral kind of generational stuff, right? Like, things that are coming up for you. And that to us is more heartbreaking than anything else, because we are here because we care and because we want to build community. And it is why we are so drawn to each other and why we tie together and why we spend so much time together and are partnered together, because that is the value that we see in it. And I'm not saying everyone has to feel that way. And I'm not saying everyone has to do rope that way. But if if the way that you all are currently doing it is the only way that people are learning about it, that is a problem. Mm-hmm. Mix it up. Make sure there are other voices, and you as attendees can demand that of your cons and of the people hosting these events. And if you are not, you are a part of the problem. Period. End of story. So if you really are in this fight, if you're really committed to this work, we also need to look in our own house, because our own house ain't right. It's not right. And so we can't even get our own house in order. And then y'all want to run around in the world and be like, Black Lives Matter, and I'm working on my white privilege, and I'm working on that. The kink house ain't even together. We ain't even together. We don't even got it together. And like, get it together in the space that you are.
Wow. See, we're just,
my friend was like,
we're on fire here today.
But like,
so surprised you had that balance in there too, by the way.
like our house is not in order, and we cannot run around to other people's houses or the big house and try to change stuff if we can't even figure out how to change it in our own house. And I think that that's an important piece of this work, why I'm personally like very concerned about some of the kink stuff that I'm seeing and a lot of the stuff that you all are sharing. Like, yes, it's good to be doing this work in the real world, but you all love to forget that this all exists in the kink world and that our kink house is not in order. We are not in order. We don't got it. It ain't right. And so this is not it. And so we need to fix this before we can even try to fix anything else. And I want to see more of that. I want to see more of you all talking about the real issues that exist in this community, the community that you say you are a part of, the community that you say you care about. And so, yeah, I think
and expect more from I really loved what B just said, which is if you are teaching, you are in a position of power, absolutely, and you need to expect more out of the teachers. I'm so sick of this bullshit that I hear from people that are just like, I'm just teaching. I don't really want to get into any of that. I don't want to really like get involved. I'm just teaching. Bullshit, and require more from them because they're in a position of power whether they recognize it or not. And also just sort of like as a small segue possibly to what we want to talk about next, I also just want to say in terms of like, not everyone who does something well should fucking teach. And this is coming from someone who doesn't do like a lot of things super, super well, but I'm an inherent teacher. I am an educator. That is who I am in my blood. I don't care if I learned something 5 minutes ago, I'm going to find a way to try to teach it to you in a way that you'll understand and translate it to you in your language. But that's just because that's who I am. And there are so many people that can do a lot of the things that I like to teach so much better than me. But this is where I always say, like, get in where you fit in and let go of the fucking ego, because you could be someone, and this is something that I don't see happening enough in rope specifically, especially if we're going to charge this much for these classes. Find someone to write your content for you. For the love of fucking God. You know how many times I've done that for free for so many of you? And I wish I had a list of who was in here, because I wouldn't call you out, but I would tell you that you're in here, because I know you're probably in here or you're going to watch the replay. I have sat down with so many of you and just been like, hey, let's organize the content of your class. Let's sit down and talk about what's the best way to actually deliver this information. How can you keep it interactive? How can you keep people involved throughout delivering this content? How can you relate and make sure that it's inclusive? How can you make this an actually fit into the time in which you're allotted and given? And just understanding how much content people can actually absorb in a certain amount of time. All of those are skill sets. And if you don't have that, instead of just fucking winging it, like, think of to yourself, can I hire someone? Can I get someone in here to write my content for me? Or if you're someone who is not great at teaching, write content for someone else to teach. Write content and say like, hey, I'll be in there. Maybe we can teach this as a pair. I'll actually show the ties, but like, I am not great at communicating with student bodies and making sure that they're understanding information in the time allotted of a con class. Cool. Let's fill in the holes. Because I've seen so many of these classes where I'm just like, what are we supposed to be doing in here and what's happening? And it's just getting away from them, because either people aren't used to teaching the certain amount of people that are in the class. People don't understand that like we can't see tiny, knots from far away. So they're having to go around the entire room and didn't allot for the time for that. Just all of these different issues that come up in our classes that can make our education better and more fruitful and more potent, so that when people are actually paying these prices, they feel like they're walking away with some confidence to go home. And it's not just that they're going to cons to meet all the cool rope people that they know on the internet, because that breaks my fucking heart. Because who am I? Fucking nobody.
Yes.
Like, who am I? Fucking nobody.
Also
like,
me. Nobody.
Nobody that you should be paying $300 to come to a con to meet. Like, it is so flattering and shit, but like, what like, you need to buy food and make sure that you can pay your gas money and also like learn some shit that you want to fucking learn. You know what I mean? Like, it breaks my heart to hear that from people, because as we all know, those of us who go to cons and go to intensives, it's baptism by fire. We get like a huge influx of information in a very short time. Half the time we leave and forget that shit. And a lot of the times it's really just about like who we get to spend time with, share space with, and who really connects with us, in which we know what type of teachers we learn from. I always say con classes should be like little introductions of who you want to learn from. When you go to a con class, it's like, oh, that person taught in a way that I respond to. I might not remember anything that I learned because I went to 12 classes in a 2-day day span, but I know that I can learn from YumYumPanda and I resonate with them. So I want to buy some of their videos. I want to make sure that I attend when they go to, when they do an intensive. I want to ask my local dungeon if we can bring them in to teach and understand what type of teachers respond to how you learn. But we can't expect to make all of the change in a day. So yes, it's hard work. And yes, it means paying more attention. And yes, it means collecting more information. But welcome to the fight. If you're really here, like, come correct.
Ooh, I just want to echo that. Come correct.
Come correct.
Come correct. And I think this kind of does is a beautiful segue into this next conversation. And again, I just want to echo, I am talking to non-Black people and white people. That is who I'm talking to. One of the biggest things that I think we all need to hone is understanding our role in this fight and where it is appropriate for us to show up and how is it appropriate for us to show up. Scout very quickly mentioned that whole Blackout Tuesday. So y'all just jumped on that.
Yep.
Where did that come from? Who said that was what we were doing? What Black person did you talk to that's leading organization-wide initiatives or, doing this work that told you to do that? And I'm trying to shame folks. I know that folks ended up recognizing the error in the ways and changed it. And so I'm not trying to shame you right now. I'm just saying this is a clear example. This is a clear example.
Oh, wait, our live video ended because we went too long. So I want to make sure that I share this first because before we go back on. But hey, everybody on Facebook, we're managing right now.
Instagram popped off.
We went over time. So usually what will happen on Tension with Intention is people can go to the after show and finish watching it on YouTube and Facebook. But because we are in the middle of a very important conversation, I want to make sure that we get back on today. So I'm going to say Tension with Intention. And I can finish the description later. I'm going to just throw it on here, make sure that it saves, because we all know Instagram. If you let it go for 1 second, they're going to be like, we lost it. Sorry, the video's gone forever. Okay, so now we can get back on live. I saw it counting down to an hour, and I meant to say.
I was thinking about it too when we were talking.
I got so into the conversation. Okay, so are you in there?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. We're back, y'all. Sorry, we were on for way too long. So once again, I just want to reiterate that. I want to reiterate that in the future with Tension with Intention, what will happen is we will try to get through all the important topics in the first hour. And if you want to continue watching for the after show, then you can hop on Facebook. So if you're not already liking the Rope Witch Facebook, go there and do that. Or you can go onto YouTube on the Rope Witch and watch the rest of the after show. But we're about to share something really big. So we want to make sure that we hop back on Instagram and put the whole thing. So this will be in 2 parts on IGTV. So take it away. Pass the mic back to Hannah.
So this conversation about understanding our role in social justice work and understanding our role in any given kind of time or conversation or particular population that needs to be amplified, right? Currently, right now, we are in the space of like Black Lives Matter and they need to be amplified. Black voices need to be amplified. We need to be centering Black folks right now. This is the conversation we need to be centering Black folks right now. And so thinking about that, right? Because it's going to change. Your role in these conversations will change as the conversations change or as the topics change or as the populations that we're focusing on change, right? If this was an LGBTQI focused situation or event that had recently happened, like I'd be speaking about this very differently. My role would be very different. But as a non-Black person, it's important to recognize that my role is always going to be behind Black folks. My role is never at the front, it is never in the center, and it is never in competition with any Black folks. Those folks need to organize in whatever capacity they want to do, and then they are great about sharing with other people about how other people can be a part of the movement and a part of the struggle and a part of the fight. Because the other important piece of this is that we need everyone in this fight. We need every single person that is willing to fight. And that fighting looks differently for every single person. I get it. Not everyone's going to be out at protests. Not everyone's going to be able to do physical labor. There are things that people are not going to be able to do, and that is okay. What I want us to try to hone in on and recognize is, what is my role? And when you're asking yourself, what is my role? Ensuring that you are not putting yourself at the center of that question, right? What is my role in relation to this work? And, you know, I see this in my personal work a lot with just white folks that I work with, in terms of, I really care. I want to do something. Tell me how I can be helpful. I want to be seen as helpful. I want to be seen as an ally. I want to be seen as somebody that's doing this work. And the thing that I try to ask people to remember is that every question you just asked me centers you at every point of that conversation. You want to be seen. You want to be known as a quote unquote good person. You want to be seen as a not racist. And you want to be seen as somebody that's doing something. And I think the best thing that I can say is that, woo, marginalized, oppressed groups can call out fake allyship in a minute. They can spot it from a mile away. Y'all, if you're doing the work, I promise you that it is being noticed in some capacity. But let me just say this also. Black people don't owe you shit. They don't owe you a thank you. They don't owe you a great job. They don't owe you thank you for doing that. They don't owe you shit. And so if you are doing stuff to get a gratification of like a thank you, or like notice me, or like comment on my photo, or like this, or share this, or share my stuff, like if you are doing this work with that at the core of like what fuels you for this work, we're already off track. We're already off track. The journey is already off track, and we got to get you back on track. And that is where I recognize my role is that my role is about getting other folks, non-Black folks, on track and getting them in this journey. Because I think Scout shared something, and I also shared something too, about burnout is real and it happens. And I've been actively doing this work in a professional space for years, which means every single day I'm getting up, dealing with this, talking to white people, talking to people in my organization, trying to dismantle structures, implode systems, burn it all to the ground, and rebuild it back up. That is what I'm trying to do with my work. And it's exhausting for me alone. So I can't even imagine how exhausted Black people are right now, because they wake up and have to do this also every single day. And so,
don't know what's going to happen to you every day. Like, that's something I need people to really, really, really understand, even if you've never quite understood. And I personally, in this one moment, am not trying to shame anyone by saying people who are just like so shocked that this is like happening and whatever. It's so tiring to me, because this stuff has been happening for so long on such a wide scale. Try to think of all of the people who have not been recorded, who have been murdered by police. Like, y'all are shocked and traumatized by seeing the videos that are just coming out. Think of all of the things that haven't even been documented. Like, think of all of those years, and the fact that I was raised in a system to understand what to do to avoid law enforcement, period. Like, I was raised with that shit. Like, there are so many different instances of, you know, just little things that I talk to my Black friends about that we all do, that we realize our white friends are like, why? And it's just, especially living in Austin, who's like super, super green, and people like to see it as progressive. And I was talking the other day with some of my Black friends in the wellness community about going into stores, and how a lot of stores in Austin will ask you, do you need a receipt? Because they're trying to save paper and all the things. And I'm always like, yes, I need a receipt. And people are always looking at me like, why do you need a receipt? And I'm like, my ass is not walking out the door without proof that I bought this, because best believe I've probably been followed in this store. I have definitely been stopped on the way out of stores before, especially in Austin, where half the time they won't give you a bag and you're just like walking out with stuff. People will look at you and be like, did you buy that? Can you prove it? And I don't care if the cashier is just right there that I just bought from. All bets are off. Like, I don't need any type of reason, just little things, and people just being like, I'm so confused as to why you would ever be worried about any of those things. And just the times that I, as a lone, young, in my 20s woman, have been pulled over at night on the side of the road with cops who call backup, like 3 or 4 SUV cops, and just for me. You know what I mean? And my other friends have also experienced that. I've heard stories from my friends in Austin who've also experienced being pulled over at 1 a.m. for 45 minutes, having to prove that they haven't been drinking by four SUVs of cops. And if something had happened, who's you think one of them are gonna like tell anybody? You think it's gonna be what do? You think we're gonna like report it? You think anybody's gonna give a shit? Like what's gonna happen then? Like absolutely not. That stuff happens all the time. And that shit is real. And it's something that we live in constantly. You think that George Floyd knew he wasn't going to come home that day? No. That was over a fake 20. That was over a fake 20 that they don't even think was fake anymore. I'm not walking out of the store without a receipt. No thanks. Because that can very easily turn into me calling for my mom and dying on the side of the road while people record me on Facebook. And I'm just not willing to put myself in those situations for kink or for rope or for buying food or for any of the reasons. So when people are just always wondering, and by the way, no one's ever asked me about any of those experiences in the kink world, which is fine. No one's ever asked me about like how rope can affect me on a racially based, in a racially based way, except for when I've tied with people who are intimate partners of mine. And it's like, what kind of sign are we also like telling people in that? Is that like we have to have a certain level of attraction to someone in order to earn the worthiness of somebody even asking how this is going to affect me or to even notice or care? There are so many different layers of this. Okay. And so to get out of that deep space, I just want to get into my woo-woo space for a second because I have to woo-saw. I have a lot of energy built up in me and I'm doing a lot of work right now with people. But I want to just go to my motherfucking African oracle cards here for a second and give you some divination tips because I am, after all, the rope witch. And so this first card that I drew while we were talking earlier, it's called Plenty. So I'm going to show it to both of the cameras. And this is really a card that is basically about where there's trouble, there's also like hope. Where there's clearing and burning down, there's also discovery and birth of something new. And as long as we are constantly leaving the door open for experiences to happen, whether they're traumatizing, whether we sense them as negative, or whether they're positive and transformative, we're keeping the door open for all of the possibility to also come in. So when things are happening, just take the movement. Just take the movement and the shift. The second one is iron. It says dogs have 4 legs but only walk 1 path. And this brings me back to the idea and to the understanding that all of our work looks different. And it really doesn't matter all of the different ways you operate this work. And it doesn't matter what you're doing in your life. It should all be walking towards the mission of creating a better space for all of us to live, period. Whether it's your rope, whether it's your vanilla career, whether it's your job, whether it's the job of raising your children, whether it's, whatever it is that you have in your life that's driving you, it should all be working towards this common goal. There is Grit, which is always this like little funny cat. And it basically is a card that exemplifies knowing where to put your energy. So especially for those of you, especially white people who are new to this fight, a key to sustaining is understand that every fight is not your fight and you can't fight every battle. God knows I can't argue with every white person on Facebook that wants to argue with me or like shit talk one of my posts. I can't ignite that fight. They don't deserve my energy. And you really have to practice having the discernment and hone in on the discernment of what deserves your fight and what doesn't, and who is actually hearing you. And if it's falling on deaf ears, save your breath and go to the next. And last but not least is nurturing, which is this beautiful like hummingbird. Travel, go place to place, find the nourishment. The nourishment is the medicine. Find the self-care, find what fills you up. This is also why I talk about having good sex. This is also why I talk about having orgasms to reclaim your joy. Because like go to the nourishment, go to the nurturing and claim this nourishment without any apology. So that's what I got for reading y'all today.
And I think too, just thinking about your role as a white person or a non-Black person in this conversation, and everyone's role has a purpose and it looks very differently, right? I know that many of you are very new to this journey, very new to this work, very new to this fight. And so you need to find where your place is in all of this. And the answer is never actually front and center. And so what does that look like? Does that look like sitting in a meeting and when somebody is speaking, especially a person of color, especially a Black person, when they are speaking, are you Are you amplifying that voice? Are you saying, I echo so-and-so, and in addition, I'd like to add blah, 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 whatever else you want to say, right? It's about adding to the conversation, adding to what's already been said, adding to the work that's already been done by Black folks, because this is the other problematic thing that's happening right now. I just shared the New York bestseller Times list on my story, and luckily Aluo's So You Want to Talk About Race is number 1 in the paperback nonfiction, but you know what's number 2? White Fragility, written by Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah.
She a white woman.
A white lady.
She's white. But we think that her book is the most important book to be reading right now. Guess what? She may have wrote the book White Fragility, but she's not the first person to talk about it. She's not the first person to think about it. She's not the first person to study it. I bet you it was a Black person. Actually, I'm almost 100% sure it was a Black person. A black woman, most likely. Because we have been built off the backs of Black people in general, but particularly Black women in scholarly work, we have built off their backs. And I know that as someone that studies this, as someone that reads this work. I try really hard to only read work by BIPOC authors as much as possible. I do recommend White Fragility occasionally to especially white folks, because you all love to hear race conversations from other white folks. And y'all got to get over that. We got to get over that.
Well, it's because it's uncomfortable. Like, here's the thing. And it's also probably something that you haven't experienced a lot, because honestly, there are a lot of black people, especially right now, who don't want to talk to you. Like, I'm just going to be honest. If you're a white person, there are a lot of Black people right now who are like, no thanks. And like that, I'm one of those people. Like, I'm one of those, not for all of you, but for most of you, I'm like, I don't have it in me. I don't want to argue with you. I don't want to have to bring you towards the light. And that's because of what Panda was just referencing in terms of building off the backs of Black scholars and Black information and Black experience. Because I remember being a 9-year-old and understanding White Fragility. I didn't have the words to put with it because it wasn't a thing. It wasn't a hot button word to know what White Fragility was, but I knew what it was because I experienced it with my friends. And this is the most ridiculous, but if you're a millennial, you'll fucking get it. This is the most ridiculous example, but this is the most like easy surface level example without getting too deep that I can give you in this moment. I remember when the movie Bring It On came out, okay? And if you've been watching me for a while, you've probably heard me tell this story. I remember when Bring It On came out, the cheerleader movie with like the Black team and the white team in California, and they battle and blah, 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 blah. And I remember going to see that with all of my friends because I was a dancer and a lot of my friends were gymnasts and a lot of my friends were cheerleaders. And like, we all went to go see that together, all white girls, of course, all of these white girls who live in my neighborhood because I lived in white suburbia growing up and went to school inside of the city. So we all go see this movie. And after this movie, I'm actually elated because it's one of the first movies I get to see in theaters in public when I'm a kid where like the Black team wins. I'm like, oh my God, we won? Oh my God. Like, I just remember being stunned. I was moved by the fact that I was like, fuck, they just made us win for all these white kids. Like, holy shit. I just was like so happy. And the first things my friend said when we came out and started discussing it was like verbatim, and I've remembered this my whole life, is, yeah, the movie was really great. I just think it would have made more sense and it would have been better if the white team would have won at the end. Like, legitimately, like with no like worry that that's like a weird statement to say, just with like, I just think it would have just been better, and like willing to have an argument about it. And I'm like, I don't have the energy to even explain to you why that's so fucked up. And I'm 9, you know what I mean? I'm trying to like, how old? Probably like not between 9 and 10 or 11. And so I'm just over here like, how do I explain to these other white 9-year-olds, which is really also not my job, that it is the fragility in your inner being that can't just celebrate one thing. By the way, the white team stole everything from the Black team. And then they were like, well, I just think that they picked themselves back up by coming up with something new. And I'm just like, you think they're minimal? You think they're, and this speaks on a global scale. You think that the white mediocrity sits at a higher level than hardworking, creative, original Black people. That's lower on your totem pole than white mediocrity. And you guys know that I say this on almost every live that I do. I have never seen a country celebrate white male mediocrity in the way America does. Woo! Y'all celebrate this shit like these dudes are hot shit. Y'all celebrate this shit like this dick must be gold. Because I'm like, these white boys aren't doing shit out here. And I am just see y'all celebrating this shit. Like, and every little thing that they do is like fucking gold. And I'm just out here like, what? How the hell did Trump become president? And that's a whole other can of worms I'm not even willing to get into, but it's like, how Sway? Because this is like the fucking white mediocrity that we raise all the way up to the top. And I'm just like, I don't understand. And yes, every part of American culture is Black culture. And I'm going to say that again. every part of American culture, all your shit that you like to do, all your music, all your dances, all your clothes, all your hairstyles, all that shit comes from us. And it wasn't cute when we did it. It's only cute when y'all do it. And so it's trying to understand that you have this intrinsic ability to just take shit and own it and be like, this is mine now, I'm turning it, and now it's acceptable because we're doing it. And I think that's really, really relevant in the rope world in general. And I think that you just have to be more conscious of how easy it is for you to step on people in order to protect your ego. And having these conversations with other Black people is an ego game, because you're going to get your ego hurt real bad. I'm just going to tell you, you are, because we're not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm not going to make it sweet for you. I'm not. Because guess what? When I was a little Black girl growing up in the world, nothing was sugarcoated for me. And it's not because it's a revenge game. It's because you got to tap into that resilience. And Black people, we already got that resilience. Okay, that's how we still are here. That's how we're surviving after 500 years of this shit. 500 years. We're out here because we still got this inner resilience and shit. And this is something that I said the other day, and I didn't finish my point, and I want to say it again here because some people messaged me asking me about it. People have called me a victim blamer, and people have called me unapologetic and someone who doesn't genuinely care about people's feelings because of my stance on cancel culture when all of these consult violations have come up in rope. And the idea that I'm like, we have to have a centered conversation, because if we were to cancel all of you, like, we would have no community whatsoever, because all y'all have done fucked up shit. Let me just tell you. And if you haven't, you will, and it's counting down the minutes. So all of y'all would be canceled, all of you. So cancel culture doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And when I am in a position where I'm not the victim, where something's not happening to me, some of y'all want to come at me and be like, oh, you just don't give a shit, and how dare you say that? Well, guess what? It's the middle of the Black Lives Matter trend in America, and I am the fucking bottom bitch in this fucking totem pole of power and class in America, and I'm still out here telling you that cancel culture is bullshit. So stop with that fucking mess. Yes, remove people from their pedestal. Yes, these people should not be teaching. Yes, they shouldn't be given any type of fucking authority, and yes, they should be centered in being called in to do their motherfucking work with all of our eyes on them. We should be watching them do this fucking work and holding them accountable to make sure they do this fucking work. The people that choose to engage with that, and the proper people for the job, depending on who it is. But this whole cancel culture bullshit and pretending like y'all are solving problems with that, y'all aren't solving shit, because nothing's actually getting canceled. These people are still teaching. They're disappearing for a year and showing back up with new bottoms and new tops and new whatever. That is not the solving the actual problem. You have to have some sort of working solution in order to create redemption, because you all have shit to learn, let me tell you. And if as a Black woman in the rope world, I were to cancel everybody who had offended me, let me tell you, I could smear a lot of y'all out here on these public streets. I could put all y'all stuff out here on these streets in my experiences. And I'm also looking at you, Austin. I could put you out here on these streets, but I'm not out here for that. I'm trying to actually come correct and tell you, it may not be me, but somebody needs to talk to your ass, and somebody needs to sit down with you, and y'all need to have conversations and like figure out how we can move to the next level.
And I think too, just to echo what Scout is saying too, right? Like, we're not, because I feel very similar about cancel culture. We're not saying that folks who have been harmed need to do this work, but that is who ends up doing the work, because ain't none of y'all want to hold people accountable and come together for community. Do you know how difficult it is for me to find people to be a part of my accountability circle? I have been looking in Austin for the last at least probably 4 or 5 months. I haven't found a single person willing to do it. And I have people in Seattle who I'm very grateful for their work, but they're in Seattle and I'm in Austin, and I'm engaging with people in Austin, and I need people in my circle to work with me here in Austin, because if I harm somebody in Austin, I need somebody here in Austin. And so it's like this narrative that we create that, like, if you are somebody that helps or is a part of somebody's accountability circle, that you're like inherently supporting their bad behavior or their consent violation or whatever it is that the narrative becomes. But people cannot do accountability work on their own, and they need somebody in their community to be in the process with them, to be in the journey with them. And it does not need to be the person that they harmed, because both people have their own healing and their own work that they need to do. And so I'm just so like, this is such a whole nother conversation because we have such big feelings about both of them. But I think it just brings us back to this conversation about your role. And the question I want to ask is, what the hell are you providing for this community? What are you providing?
What are you bringing to the table?
What are you bringing to the table? Because we are done. We are done being at tables with people who are not bringing anything. And we are out here bringing everything. And sitting in these classes, sitting in these teaching spaces, applying for cons, scavenging for scraps. For people to mistreat other people in this community and to just think that it's fine and to think that it's okay because it's fine that we paid Panda the least out of everyone here and made her teach more classes than anyone else and made her pay to be here. It's fine that we did that because she's here and so she's clearly fine with it. I'm not fine with it, but I don't have any other option. I have no other option. So in order for me to be able to share about my material and my education and my philosophy and the things that matter to me in rope, I have to make a sacrifice in order to get into that space. When there are so many of you that just land in that space or fall into that space because you're quote unquote good at what you do, but you don't know how to teach or you haven't really crafted your teaching skill set at all. And nobody is holding accountability for that. Nobody at these cons is hiring people to do teaching evaluations, actual class evaluations. I don't mean just attendees responding because yes, attendee feedback is important, but you need a trained instructor who knows how to teach professional development with teaching in your spaces, looking at these classes and being like, this person has this work to do, this person has this work to do, this is how we're going to do better. And so think about it. What is your role? What is your role in getting our house in order?
Yes.
Because it needs to come in order.
Yes.
We are not coming correct right now. It is not okay. And we need to get our house in order. So what is your role in that? And be accepting of a role that's invisible. And be accepting of a role that is sometimes thankless. And sometimes people aren't noticing. And sometimes people aren't saying, thank you for everything that you're doing.
Ooh, Allie's out here telling this truth. Allie said, in fact, they have actually turned it down when offered for free. Yes, because I think people are just afraid to see the biases in which they're accepting classes. I think people are afraid to see that they're, just because of somebody's name, they're willing to accept their classes without seeing any type of synopsis, without seeing any type of outline, without seeing any type of content creation for a class, because they're just like, you have a big name. People will buy our tickets if they see that you're coming here. Awesome. And then that's where it ends. And that's why we're saying demand more from these cons, demand more from your teachers, demand more. It's not just about someone's name. It's not just about who someone is, because you're not going to gain any skills from these people if they're not intentional with what they're actually delivering and if they're not holding the space in a correct way. And so that brings us to our reveal here, I guess is what I could call it.
Yeah.
We are very happy to tell you that we have created a solution for this. So Panda and I, and along with our beautiful, beautiful friend Caress, who, if you live in the Austin area, you might know her. She is heavily integrated in the poly community as well as the kink communities and other various communities that exist on the vanilla side of life that also relates to both Panda and I. And we are coming together to create what is going to be known as Wild Authentic Mindfulness. It is a conscious consulting collective, and that is what is pinned in the Instagram. It's also scrolling on the Facebook. And we have just realized that not only have we been consulting for free for a very long time, but that we have the ability to actually offer a solution to our community, that we want to put something on the table, that we want to bring to the table. And so what we are bringing with this consulting collective is a way to make sure that your con space, that your class space, that your dungeon that holds classes, that you as a presenter that travels with class content not only has inclusive content throughout the entire gender scale as well as identity, but also specifically on race and understanding different cultures throughout your content delivery and throughout your actual con. So you can chat a little bit more about, with us about what that entails and what our package actually entails. But you can look out for my announcement tomorrow. We're all going to be making an announcement on our pages with all of us tagged. So if you're not quite sure who Caress is and you want to make sure that you're following all of us, look out, especially on the Rope Witch Instagram, which is public. You will see a post made tomorrow, as well as a call to action for you to add your email. If you are interested in talking to us about a conference, this is a really good time because we are in what I like to call the great pause. So this is a time to get your shit together and come back correct, so that when we're reforming and rebuilding these conference spaces, that they are actually in a correct, fruitful, and cultivating way. And we're not just continuing on with the same bullshit. Because one gift that we are given with this great pause is this is a time for us to birth that new existence. We can really birth the community that we've always wanted. There's nothing stopping us except for our own bullshit. So this consulting group is here to help get rid of the bullshit.
Yes, and we're very excited about it. It is BIPOC led, BIPOC owned, by BIPOC just focused. And so we're really excited about launching this consulting collective. And yeah, to echo everything that Scout just said about what we will be offering. We will be offering packages. We'll be offering consult hours if you only need a couple of hours, if you just want us to look over something, assess your policies or procedures, or look at the layout of your con, or look at accessibility needs, like whatever else we can provide for you to create a more holistic space. And moving away from these spaces that are so white centered, so built on white culture, and so focused on white supremacy. And I just want to say that all of the spaces are built on white supremacy, including the spaces we all exist in outside of kink. Period. End of story. That's how they were built, and they were built that way for a reason. And so we have to be honest about how to uproot from the inside, right? We're all in here together. We're in this house. How do we uproot the foundation of this house and rebuild it the way it needs to be built in order to build up and really create what we all, I think, really want in this space and community and through kink. And so hire us. I'm just going to say it. Hire us. Hire us to consult for you. Hire us to be at your event. Hire us to look over your stuff. Hire us to just chat with you while you're building out stuff. Hire us. And we haven't figured out any of the pricing or anything like that yet, but understand that BIPOC owned, specifically Black owned, does not mean discounted or cheap.
Yeah.
Does not mean discounted or cheap.
Unlearn that.
We are done. BIPOC folk are done dumbing down our prices, pulling back I am done teaching at places that I have to give money to teach at. I'm just done.
I literally know, and I'm just going to throw this out here for scales. We don't have any prices ready for y'all yet because this is something that was so organic. We've literally just like had phone calls and have been talking continuously for days over messages of planning what we want to do and bringing all of our skill sets to the table. But I also just want to make clear, I know specifically of a few white male rope teachers who make more going to 2 cons a year than I've made in 3.5 years going to cons or teaching classes. So I just want to give a little bit of perspective when we say we're done discounting our shit. This is not one way for us to like get rich once again. Like this is a way for us to barely even break even with a lot of the money that you all have been paying a lot of other cis white men in this space for years. So just putting a little bit of context to that. But yes, I'm super, and something that Panda said earlier, I really want to address, and this will be addressed in length on our information, but I want to like say it verbally now. Earlier, when I was working on writing a little bit of like our mission statement, I used the term cultural competency when I was like throwing around terms to try to add into our mission. And Panda brought up a really good point of understanding and switching out the terms cultural competency with cultural humility. And so I really want to call onto that for a moment, because what we are not going to be doing in this collective is giving a stamp of approval of like, yay, you're not racist. Like we will not be giving any white people that stamp of approval. We won't be. So if that's what you're looking for, don't hire us in order to become like get like a pass on like, but I hired this consult company. Like we're going to help you do the best that you can, but we're not giving you a stamp of approval, because it is impossible for you, especially as white people running large events, for you to be competent in anyone else's culture. And that is something that even just with talking with words and typing with words and dealing with communicating and code switching to communicate and translate to you all, that even was just like brought up to the surface as a reminder today, is like, you will never be competent in anyone else's culture. And it's really just about being bringing humility to the table and being humble when it comes towards understanding that you are existing in a space in which you are taking advantage of someone else's culture, and how can we move through that space consciously.
Yeah, and I think too, to echo what Scout is saying, like language matters. It matters so much. What language you use to describe something, to talk about something. It can put the onus on the person you're talking about. It can put onus on systems. It can put onus on multiple different facets of whatever you're talking about. And so you need to be clear when you're speaking and talking about this kind of work, what language you're using, and if that is actually inclusive and equitable and appropriate language to be discussing some of these issues and things. So we can help with language, we can help with all of those things. And I think this is just a great segue into the last piece that we also want to offer for today's live, is that I'm here and I'm already dedicating my time to be here. So ask your questions. If you work for an organization and you're like, my racist ass organization isn't listening to me, I need to figure out how to get involved in this work at my work. How do I bring this up to my boss? How do I get my coworkers on board? How do I build a team at my organization? How do I exist in these systems? I am a systems level thinker. I do a lot of strategy work. I do a lot of systems work through my job. So you all are getting access to me right now. So ask the questions, ask what you want to know, because I promise you I'll probably be able to answer it for you and give you some tangible skills and tools and next steps. So this is it.
Yeah. This is the free ass moment.
This is the free ass moment. So if you have questions, if you are concerned about something, if you don't understand something, if you are trying to be in this fight and you're like, I don't know where my role is, or I don't know what to do, come through. Mm-hmm. I'm here for you right now.
This is the time.
This is the time. And if none of y'all ask any damn questions, you aren't listening.
And I'm also just at this point where, I mean, y'all have seen me bitch on my stories for the last couple of days, and I get this from my auntie over here, which I always plug her. But if you care about any of these things, you might want to follow Dr._midwife, who is just my auntie Stephanie over here, who is an amazing midwife that talks about burning down the industrialized medical system. But she always talks about don't stick around and don't participate. And she always says, with all these people fucking kneeling and shit and Black Lives Matter, dust off those dusty ass knees and stand up. If you are not willing to fucking participate, walk out the door. And this doesn't mean that you need to like just try to pull random questions out of your ass right now. I'm talking about in general, like on these posts, on these, on the Instagrams, on the web. Don't be out here just spying on people. Like, communicate with people. Don't just throw up the heart likes on people's posts. Maybe engage with them in an actual fucking comment. When I give you your little pop quiz, bitch, in my stories, it's time for you to start voting and actually come correct. Like, we're not here for the silence anymore. Put your money where your mouth is. And yeah, dust off the dusty ass knees and stand up and walk out. If the heat is too hot in the kitchen, this is hard work. And we need you to come correct. We need you to be curious. We need you to be vulnerable enough to be allowed to be wrong. You need to be vulnerable enough to be allowed to be wrong, and to hear that you're wrong and pick your shit up and keep going. That's what needs to happen here. So if you have any questions at all about experiences, about systems, about your cons, your job, about doing this work in general, Panda's here. I'm here in any capacity. We're going to kind of ride out the next like 10, 12, 15 minutes on here. Trust me, we have plenty we can always talk about, but this is your time to get access to that free information.
Come get this free knowledge, because it's not going to be free for much longer.
Whether it's emotional or tactical or any of the things. Cancel culture. You talked about cancel culture. How does someone come back? I feel like we both have answers to this question. In my personal opinion, in my world of accountability, nobody ever leaves to have to come back. That people need to be centered. The person who has been hurt needs to be centered in terms of compassion and healing. And the person who is offended needs to be centered with accountability. And so yes, they need to leave in terms of not teach. They need to step off their pedestal. They need to do all of those things. But the real question is if you're doing the work, you're engaged, and there are people witnessing this work from you, and people are willing to be in your accountability circle, it shouldn't be a question of when you come back or how you come back, because people would be able to speak to the fact that you have grown in your own way. And maybe the answer is that you don't come back. Maybe the answer that you don't come back in the same way. And maybe you're not that teacher that's going to get hired to go around all of America to teach things. And maybe you have to pivot. Maybe you have to pivot. And that's where I talk to you about it on like a business scale. If you're one of those people who this is your business, maybe it's a time to pivot. But in my grand scheme of things, nobody ever leaves to have to come back. Like, this is a community, and none of those people actually ever leave anyway. But
Yeah, I think of course my answer is based in systems too. I echo everything that Scout is saying about what I also personally believe in what accountability looks like. But I talked about this at NARIX a couple years ago as well. But the reason that our culture has gotten so kind of chaotic around consent violations is because the systems in which we are supposed to be able to use to be able to build accountability and build this community accountability haven't been working and haven't been set up properly, and people aren't engaging in them in a way that is actually meaningful and intentional. And we have all taken this individualistic mindset that we've gained through society and through our lived experience in society and brought that with us into the kink space. And so now things are just about us, right? Like, what did I do? Who did I hurt? How did I get hurt? All of those kinds of things. And we like make this all about us. And so then it becomes this conversation of like, what do I need to do in order to come back? What do I need to do in order to teach again? And it's like, you're centering yourself at the every step of that process. And you need people in your life to be like, you're not the center of this conversation right now. Teaching should not be your goal. Being in front of people should not be your goal. Being at events should not be at your goal. Your goals need to be built around healing and need to be built around the work that you need to do. And so the other thing is, I think Sphing is actually on this IG, but I heard that they used this concept of networking versus community. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I really resonate with as a person that heard that secondhand. Just like, we need to be honest about what we're cultivating here, mm-hmm. because we are not cultivating a community. Because when my car breaks down, when my house is flooded, when I don't have anywhere to go, when I, as a single person living on my own, mm-hmm. need help, who am I calling? I'm calling people in my community. And that is Scout, my other partners, my other people in my polycule. Those are people that I count on. Those are my community. I love rope people and I love being in spaces with you all, but none of you all really show up for me in any big way that makes me feel like I could trust you in any real way. And I'm very friendly and I'm very open and I'm always willing to chat with you all. And I'm always very, if we've seen each other in public, I'm like hugging and like very interested in you and want to get to know you and chat with you and stuff like that. But there's this extra level of effort that goes into building community that is about getting to know me as a person, getting to know me outside of kink, getting to know me outside of rope, because I hate it when people come up to me and are like, you're so famous and like I follow you and like blah blah and you're bleh, and like make a big deal out of it. Like, it's sweet, and like I'm not saying that you're a bad person or like that it's not appreciated, but we're perpetuating this culture that people exist on this pedestal or they exist in this space that is higher than other people, and that is not the truth, and that is not what we need to be communicating about what our community is built on. Our community is built on each other and built on equity and giving people space and allowing us to be in community together. And we can't do that if we have 8 people at the very top. Like, we're recreating the systems, y'all. Like, and I think that's something I wish people would understand, is that we've taken capitalism, right, with rope and created that into its own capitalistic system. We've taken oppression and systems of oppression and devaluing oppressed folks' labor, right, in the ways that we pay people for cons and the disproportionate amounts that we pay folks and all of those things. We are policing, mm-hmm. right? Like, when somebody has a consent violation, we want to police everyone and we want to be the people with pitchforks and putting in our 2 cents and chiming in on everything and thinking we know something about people that we've never even talked to before. Mm-hmm. And we want to police them. We want to get rid of them. We want to cancel them. How dare you? How dare any of us? We don't have the right to do that. We are rebuilding the problematic systems that we already exist in the world. And we have to recognize that part of that is because we are socialized to be that way, because the systems have socialized us to think that way. So that when a problem arises, our immediate thought is like, this system that already exists in this other space kind of works, and especially works for white people. So when they take over the kink space as a core white group of people, they're like, well, this system works though. And then you have black people being like, it ain't working for me, bitch. Like, it ain't working. It didn't never work. It's never worked for me over there. And now you want to input it in this space and think it's going to work for it. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And so I think that a lot of this is also talking about systems and talking about building infrastructure in our home. We need to put the framework in.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do the work to put the framework in so that when people come into this house, they know we don't act like that.
But that's not what happens. That's not what happens at all. Just as people who constantly talk to people who are new to the kink space, and they're just like, what the fuck is this a dumpster fire? And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a dumpster fire. Because we don't have a structure. We don't have a foundation. We don't have like anything that's really giving a true depiction of what is happening or any type of structural systems in general. A lot of the conferences and people holding space don't speak to one another. But I want to make sure we're not missing these questions. So
please.
How do we make remote spaces more accessible for Black people of color? Myself and my partner are offering free programs, but we want to do better. We had been working on accessibility pre-COVID, including a new venue and outreach, and it was feeling good for in-person, but COVID-19 has changed things, still searching for new answers. I have an answer to that, but I want you to address that first.
No, go ahead.
I mean, well, mine's kind of a end-all. I don't want to be, you go first.
Okay.
I don't want to be it might come off pessimistic if I go first.
What was the second piece of it? I heard that they were creating virtual classes for particularly BIPOC folks. Is that right?
Yes, and just trying to they're trying to take it remote more because of COVID.
Okay, so this is an interesting conversation that I have at my work a lot too about this question around like, how do I get these folks more involved? We're already asking the wrong question.
Yeah,
we're asking them to find us and to be able to have access to us and to be able to,
and also to want to be there. That's another thing.
Yes, and that they want to be in community with us. And I think it just is very misguided for us to believe that just because we are offering this thing that somebody of color might be interested in, that they're just going to show up and do it with us because we offered a space. And so it really is thinking about how have you set up that space? How have you advertised it? Who's in that space teaching? Who's in that space talking? Who's in that space leading? Who's in that space that is sharing content? What content are you sharing ahead of time? Are you being really inclusive of like, this is how the class is going to run. And if you need accommodations, we can provide closed captioning, or we can provide these materials ahead of time, or we can, the number of people who do not do handouts for your classes, I'm just crazy to me. That's a lot. That's like a big problem. And so crazy to me. Just thinking about holistic accessibility needs, I think is really important. So not centered on race, but also just holistic accessibility needs. And then from there, I think people need to be more honest about what it is they're looking for. If you are looking for Black folks to be in your space, go seek out genuine connections with Black folks, to be in community with them, to gain and build some trust with them, so that you can then invite them in.
They're not showing up because they don't know you.
Right.
And they don't want to be there.
Don't just show up to a BIPOC meeting and be like, hey, I'm running this like kinky rope space, and like, we'd love to have you there. Like, people, who are you? Who are you? You need to be a part of community before you can ask for that community to give something to you.
Yes. And that's, can I just say a small segue, because this is definitely pertaining to the question, but this is also for everybody. Please understand that when you are scheduling things in your city, at your dungeon, whatever, just in terms of like business and like commerce understanding, every time you schedule something, you are asking something from your community. And that's something that I feel like we have to talk about a lot in Austin, because we are very, very lucky to have many, many, many rope spaces. And what tends to happen is everyone schedules shit at the exact same time and like spends all this money flying people in, and it all overlaps, or it's all like within 1 month of each other. And it's like, what we're asking of the community, which you don't understand, is like, there was like a 6-week period in Austin where I calculated all the people and events and workshops and shit that were going on. And basically, if someone had tried to go to everything, you are asking of the community to spend over $1,000 in a 6-week period. And so just understanding that every time you're putting out an offering, what you're really doing is you're asking someone to show up. And showing up is vulnerability, and it also needs a lot of authenticity. So you're asking a lot from someone. And so the question is also like, well, what are you offering? And once again, what are you bringing to the table? So that person wants to show up there. And I think Panda made a really good point where it's like, what question are you asking and what answer do you really want? Because if you're not looking for people to form a place for people of color, that's also okay. Because you might just get to a point where you're like, I'm not the person to hold that space. But then what else can you do? Is there something else you can do? Because I'm also facing this in the vanilla world, trying to talk to doula organizations about this, of like, stop offering scholarships to your white doula trainings like it's a prize, like people of color want to learn from you to reclaim their own indigenous skill sets. And when a lot of these people are offering scholarships and stuff to workshops, it's like, what if these Black people don't want to show up in your white space as a prize? You know what I mean? And I think that's also inherently the issue with like volunteer spaces at cons, but that's a whole other conversation. So I think it's really like asking the right question. And I do think the answer to that question is, do you know these people? Do they know you? Do they trust you? And it's the same thing as when you're asking people to tie with you.
Yeah, I think that's all super, super important.
Let me see. And when it comes to remote spaces, I will just say, as someone who's been holding a lot of remote space during COVID, it's a completely different thing. Holding space and creating an energetic container during like a Zoom meeting in comparison to being in person with someone, it's a lot harder. Your body doesn't have that nervous system feedback of being with other humans. You don't get that adrenaline. You don't get that the same firing of hormones. You don't get that all of that energetic support in your body that comes from actually feeding off of other people's energy. So it's a completely different ballgame, and it's not for everyone.
Yeah, and I think just to quickly wrap up that question is like, what are you offering in these classes that is going to be a benefit to these people outside of just rope? Like, I would 100% attend a rope class that was focused on Japanese history, because I would be interested in gaining that more information on my own history, right? Like, I know what I know from my lived experiences and through my own research, but there's tons of shit I don't know. And so what am I getting out of that that's also fueling the person of color piece of me, right? Like, what am I getting out of this that's also fueling and nurturing my soul on top of just the rope education?
Yeah, I think that also goes into changing the ideals of what a con is, because I know with my classes being non-tying classes, I always get the people coming to my classes like, well, we came here because we needed a break from tying. Well, I didn't like any of the other classes in this class block. And it's always like, we just ended up here at your class. And it's like, okay, cool. But at the same time, what I'm wondering is like, why are we hosting 14 rope classes in a day? Like, anyone's going to retain that fucking information. Like, why isn't taking a rope, like history of shibari class, not a common thing at a conference? And why is it that every class is teaching a new pattern to where you're actually pretending like you're going to memorize 4 patterns in a day? Like, really challenge these spaces to rise to the occasion. There's a question that says, conflicted on how to start and maintain difficult conversations with racist, entrenched family members. It would leave me very isolated if I burned those bridges. Ooh, you're not going to like my answer to that question. Because I'm just like,
and
I know. I'm also just like, some of those bridges got to burn, and it doesn't even have to burn. That's the thing, is like, it could just be distanced. But I feel like it's okay to distance from the racist grandma. And honestly, that's the hard work we need from you guys. Is like, we need you to hold these people accountable. It's not just family. And let me just also tell you, just to reassure you, because I know for white people, y'all have had a hard time tonight in this live. So I just also want to tell you that extends to the Black community too. That's not just white people. It extends to people of color and also the Black community as well. We have to stop doing the keep it in the family bullshit. And Black families do that with keeping secrets. Black families' job is stop keeping secrets, because that's what we do, because we're afraid of all y'all and all y'all judging us and shit, and y'all already try to tear apart our family nuclear system. So like, we keep secrets, and they're deep and they're fucking rough out here. And so for white families, it's like, you got to stop letting grandma get away with the racist comments. It's not cute. It's not placating her until she eventually is not around anymore. Like, we're not doing that. Your grandma's still living in 2020 and seeing like people of color at the grocery store, and she doesn't need to be calling them niggers, and she doesn't need to be talking shit about them and clutching her bag when Black men walk next to her. We don't let come correct, and don't let them travel around in those spaces. And if it's too much of it, you can't change everybody's mind. And if it's too much of a job, then you fucking distance, because it's falling on deaf ears, and you call it a day. But we're not going to keep supporting the racist bullshit.
We're not going to be complicit in allowing people to be actively racist. And I think that's the big conversation to have with yourself, right? I understand that it's difficult to talk to family members or community members or people in your circle that may be actively racist and not willing to hear and not willing to listen. And so I think I echo a lot of what Scout is saying. You got to cut your losses where you need to cut your losses and figure it out, because blood family is not the only way that you build family here. Like, I am not super close with my family. My dad and I are pretty close, but he's also incredibly problematic. And my Filipino mother is also very problematic. And so I have to pick and choose what conversations I'm having with them. They know what I do for a living, and they don't bring shit up unless they're ready to have a conversation, because they know I'll come correct. And they know that I'll hold them accountable to that. Even on Facebook, I will just drop a comment on my grandma's nice, sweet Christian post about that ain't right. Yeah. Like, we're not out here doing that, Grandma. I love you and I see you, but we are not out here doing that. And so I think that there's also a balance you can strike of, like, I love you and I care about you as my family member. We're not doing that.
We don't act that way.
Yeah.
Like, we don't act that way.
Yeah. And so I think that, so there's a lot of ways to go about that, especially starting the conversation. I would say that, especially if they're very overtly racist and very actively racist, starting small, if you really think that they can change, and if you really think that doing the labor and the work of getting them to change is something that you think can pull some movement in that, I think you should do it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But just start small. Start with like a little maybe blurb or article or something you saw or something you share or a meme or something like that, and just bring up conversation, and then don't let them shy away from that conversation and be like, no, we're going to talk about this because this is important to me and I want to talk about it. And even if it's just you talking and they're just sitting there quietly, at least you're getting out, at least they are hearing in some capacity what needs to be said and what needs to be in the space. Mm-hmm. And whether they respond or not, whether they engage with you or not, at least they've now heard it. And so, and at least in some small capacity, there's something happening in their brain and something happening in their internal process with just hearing something.
And they also know where you stand. And the reality is like, and one of the reasons that America is so fucked up right now is people like Trump being in power allows the racists to come out of the closets. The racists never went away, by the way. Like, we feel like there was like a die down in history a little bit, but that's because there was like this little time where they felt like they had to go behind closed doors because it was no longer acceptable to be burning crosses in people's front yards and dragging Black people out of their homes at night. Like, that was no longer socially acceptable. So the racists had to like go climb into their little corners. And that's the thing, is like, you need to voice the fact that this is not acceptable, because it needs to extinguish. There's no room for that here. And before this gets cut off again, I want to make sure we get to these questions, because I think we only have one or two more things to say before we can wrap up, at least on Instagram. We got one that says, like you said, finding accountability contacts is tough. How do white folks, especially cis white men, help make accountability contacts more accessible without just increasing the number of white voices? I feel like, to me, my answer to that is that your accountability circle should be people that you tie with and that you're close to. And the way to solve that is not just to be close to white people.
I mean, I was going to say the exact.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like the solution to that is like, have non-white friends. And then maybe like, you know, then your accountability circle won't just be white people. And then you'd be uplifting all types of voices. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, also recognizing that your accountability circle needs to mirror the folks that you tie or engage with as well, right? Because I, as a person of color, or Scout as a Black woman, may not feel comfortable going to your all white male accountability circle and being like, hey, I had a problem with so-and-so. And so if you are tying folks that look like me or look like Scout, then you should have people on your accountability circle that also look like us, so that we feel comfortable going to those people and can identify with them and build community with them as well. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that there's a reason that, you know, people don't tie with certain people and things like that. And so if you are like, hey, I'm reaching out to folks of color to tie, and a lot of those folks aren't tying with me or aren't interested in tying with me, like, that's a you thing, honey. Like, mm-hmm. That means you've got some stuff you need to work on because we don't feel safe in your presence, or we don't feel safe around you. Oh, and I think I need to say something I forgot to say, because I meant to come correct about this today. I'm going to need you all to stop cherry picking what we are upset about and what we are fighting for. Because let me just say this, because Madam Posh also mentioned this on her live the other day. Y'all wanted to come at me over the KEW weekend.
Oh,
Over the July weekend.
Woo!
That was all women, WimX lineup presenters. With 75% of us were people of color. 25% of us were white. It was led by a Black woman. And y'all want to come at me for that.
Such a motherfucking uproar.
And then you want to come at me on Instagram with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Get away from me.
Yeah, I'm like,
get away from me.
Sit the fuck down.
Don't
we don't need that type of shit.
Don't ask me to tie with you because I am looking right now. I don't know if this person's on this live, but there is a person who reached out to me, asked to put rope on my body, and then behind the scenes was trash talking KEW weekend and saying how uninclusive it was for men. But then I see the Black Lives Matter all over your page too. So we care about Black Lives Matter right now because why? Because it's trendy and it's important and people will know if you don't post something. But you want to come into my DMs and try to put rope on me after you complained about the KEW weekend, which you know I came on a live and fought about? Yep. Get away from me. Get away
that
from
performative
me.
Shit. That don't ask why we don't trust people, and by we I mean people of color in general. Don't ask why we don't trust people, and especially white people, because that shit is performative till the end. That shit is performative. I've seen it time and time again. I've seen it with all types of shit, even with interracial couples. It's like the police get involved, and it's like, deuces. I'm gonna get off easy. You're gonna be in here. We're gonna have to figure it out. Maybe I'll help you hire a lawyer, but peace out. I ain't sticking around for this shit. And it's just like, we don't trust that shit. And I don't trust any of it. I don't trust. And that's why I tie with less people. I've been asked that ever since I started in the rope world. It's like, I'm so surprised you don't tie with more people. And it's like, oh yeah, that's intentional.
So yeah, I'm done with this cherry picking thing. You either are in support of social justice and injustice and fighting for injustice on a holistic level, or you can get away from me. Because I'm not going to have this Black Lives Matter conversation with you if you're going to turn around the next second when I'm like, hey, I'm a presenter at this con and it's all WimX lineup and we really need your support and we really need white men to show up and pay money to be here and learn from us. Mm-hmm. Because that's the other thing. Y'all love to tie us. Y'all love to fetishize us because I am fetishized all the time for my Asian ethnicity. All the time. You all want to fetishize me. You want to play with me. You want to tie with me. But you don't want to learn from me. You don't want to sit in a class that I'm teaching. You don't want to take education from me. Why? And I don't talk like this in class, so I know it's not because I'm aggressive. And I don't even care. I don't even care at this point. But I know I'm not like this in class. So come correct with me. Like, why don't you take classes from me? I want to know why you don't take classes from me. If you want to tie me and be in community with me and all of this stuff, and you say that all of this stuff matters to you, but you won't pay a dime. You won't pay a dime to take a class from me.
Or you do pay the dime of coming to the con, but somebody like with a bigger name is teaching at the same time, probably a harness that you've learned like 4 different times, but you want to like go and be in the same room as them. So then we hear all weekend from you, yeah, I wanted to come to your class, but my top really wanted to, and it's just like, okay, well, whatever. That's what I hear about.
Well, you weren't there.
40 minutes. We have 40 seconds left on Instagram before we get kicked off. So we actually answered all the questions except Jazz wanted to know if you had Venmo because they are having trouble with Cash App. So Jazz, I highly suggest to slide into Panda's DMs if you're having issues with Cash App and you want to know if you can send Panda money in a different way. But I want to say thank you to Instagram. I pinned the Facebook link, so if you're interested in following the Facebook, please click there. Also, this will be uploaded onto YouTube tonight or tomorrow as well. Thank you all for your support. It will also be saved on IGTV, so peace. Thank you. We have 5 seconds.
Love you all. Thank you.
It's like, bitch, you're done.
Bitch, you're done.
Like,
I can't believe we're on there for 2 hours.
2 hours. I know. Bitch, you're done. Bitch, you're finished. Bye.